It is August 5th, 2025, and this is episode 26, and we're going to stick with the issue of Patrick Heringer's murder. I spent some time talking about it in episode 25. That was primarily focused on the demands of Sarah Heringer. One that is connected to today's episode is her call for a timeline. She wants to see a detailed timeline of what went on here and where the gaps were, and that's exactly what needs to happen. And yesterday I wrote a letter to the Attorney General asking for that, and we'll see what happens. But right now the situation is such that there's been a lot of information spread about this matter, and it's there's just a lot of information. It's very confusing. There's reports every day, and they create these different nuances or different shades of the facts, and people don't really know what the real facts are. And so that's why I asked for an authoritative investigation of the facts, so that they're in one place. You can rely on those facts, and then you can use those facts to develop fixes to some of the gaps that the timeline exposes. So I did send that letter. I also copied just about every legislator, I think, in Hamilton County, state and state senate, state legislature. There was a representative that is leaving that's been reported, and so I didn't send it to that member. But I do think that we need the help of our state legislators to get something like that moving. So that's why I copied them on my letter. And I did post the letter on my Facebook page, and then it'll go up on the podcast website once this podcast gets up and gets aired. The problem is that you have a lot of moving parts, and there's a lack of clarity in terms of exactly what the true facts are. So here are some data points that we need, or some basic information that's necessary. Well, you need to start the timeline, and then as you go through your investigation, you fill in the gaps in the timeline, and you just fill it up and see what it looks like. But for example, Mordecai Black was released in January of 25 after serving X number of years in prison for some kind of violent felony. And then in February, he's housed in a halfway house, so that's number one. There's all kinds of questions about these halfway houses. For example, how many are they? Where are they located? Do neighbors get to know that there's a halfway house in their neighborhood? Things like that. But he was required to stay in a halfway house, and he left the halfway house. He cut off his monitor. He left the halfway house. So you got two different types of notifications there, I would think. The halfway house has to notify somebody, and the GPS monitor, that has to be notified to people. And so, for example, the GPS monitor, who handles that? Who's looking at the GPS monitor to make sure that the post-release control individuals are complying with the conditions of their post-release control? In the case of one case that I'll talk about in a minute, nobody was watching a post-release control individual, and that person, this was back in 2017, I believe, that person wound up murdering an Ohio State University student He didn't cut off his ankle monitor. Nobody was watching it. And I think in that case, the GPS monitor was the operation of a contractor. It was a contractor that was responsible for, all the GPS monitoring related issues. And we don't really know in the case of Mordecai Black whether there was a contractor involved or not, or whether or who was actually supposed to be monitoring. And it would just be very, very useful or helpful to know the exact dates and times and things like that. So that's just an example of one issue. So, for example, you had APA, the Adult Parole Authority, or the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, which is their parent agency, saying that they followed their procedures. Well, who says their procedures are any good? So you have to look at that. You have to look at what their procedures are. You have to see why they said they complied with them. You have to see, what caused them to make this quick change to their policy. Normally, when agencies do that, they're trying to forestall a wider investigation of their conduct or their operations. And then you had some news reports pointing out that their procedures talk about notifying local departments. And so you get down to if the post-release control individual cuts off his monitor, a warrant is issued, and the warrant goes into the National Crime Information Database, or I can't remember the exact name of it, NCIC, and the LEAD system. And I think what the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction is saying is that entering the warrant into NCIC satisfies their requirement to notify local PD. And it's hard to argue that that's not the case, but that's not what people want. People want, pick up the phone, call somebody at the department and say, hey, a violent felon in your city or your district has removed their GPS monitor and they're in the wind, and you got to track them down. That's not what happens. And it's still a mystery as to exactly what kind of conversations may have taken place, for example, with this supposed referral to a task force that they're not naming. They say that they referred the warrant to a task force, but they didn't tell the public what the task force was, except that it wasn't the Southern Ohio Fugitive Apprehension Task Force that's operated by the U.S. Marshal Service and involves multiple agencies from around Southern Ohio. So it's very, very confusing. And then you have to wonder, what did the Cincinnati Police Department, what did CPD know about Mordecai Black during the 4-month period between the time he cut off his monitor in February and the time of Patrick Heringer's murder? For 4 months he was on the loose, and there are reports that he was suspected of burglary during that period, that there was a domestic violence complaint that was filed that caused the police to go to where he was reportedly staying. And although he was not staying there at the time, they did speak to the complainant. And I think it was at that time that the CPD also found notifications of 6 parole violations in some type of database. It's not clear what that was. But the CPD itself, it also had known issues about Mordecai Black, but we don't know what they did. What do you do when you go to someone who you find they have 6 parole violations? Do you notify the adult parole authority and find out what's going on? Do you follow up with the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction and find out what the status of the person on post-release control, what their status is? I mean, those are the kind of things that you really have to dig down, and you have to get down into the details. And, you know, at this point, I don't think we know whether the CPD made any effort to track down Mordecai Black for the parole violations. You know, maybe they said that's not my job. Who knows? The burglary, the domestic violence issue, and then just the fact that he's in the wind as a violent felon. So I think there's probably some merit to the fact that APA's notification, or the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections notification about the warrant that was issued on Mordecai Black, was insufficient. But it doesn't seem like that was the only thing that was insufficient about law enforcement response to Mordecai Black cutting off his GPS monitor. So you have questions like that, and I don't know how you could possibly reform the system without knowing those facts. And believe me, the system needs to be reformed. The thing about investigations, and you know, I don't think I'm telling anybody things they don't know, but the thing about investigations is that you never know what you're going to find. You know, you start out with basically a theory or a hypothesis of what happened here, and you go about trying to prove that, but we don't really know what happened. And until you get an investigation going, you're not going to know. And so that's why I wrote the letter. That's what needs to be done. It's so funny because one of the first things that I noticed when I came back to Cincinnati is just the complete lack of government oversight. These government agencies, the city council, and you know, the sewer district and the water district and the county jail and the county offices, nobody's overseeing what they're doing. Maybe the elected commissioners and the elected city council members, maybe they are, but it's not real oversight. And so when you run into situations like Patrick Heringer's murder, where there was obvious systemic failures on the part of the government, at least 2 or 3 different government agencies, maybe as some kind of task force that was set up, why wasn't so fast notified? Why weren't they involved? It's a multi-agency task force. Cincinnati apparently is represented on the task force. This was a violent fugitive in Cincinnati. Why wasn't so fast involved? So anyway, you really need to get to the bottom of it. Unless you do an investigation, you're really not going to know. You never know what you're going to find when you conduct an investigation. And there needs to be reforms, and there are very simple things that can be done. I'm certain of it, about notifications and how to tighten the program for post-release control. They're there. Those fixes are there, and they need to be identified based on the facts. And so that's why I wrote my letter, because that's what I'm used to. I've probably reviewed, I don't know, 500 letters like the one I sent to the Attorney General. Those are the kind of letters that I used to have to deal with, and this is the type of investigation that were routine for us. So that's what I was asking for. I hope that the state legislators will help support us, and if you want to help with that request, you can contact your state legislator in Ohio. You've got Catherine Ingram is the state senator for District 9, I believe. Bill Blessing is the state senator for Senate District 8. Then you have Danny Isaacson in House District 24. He's actually the minority leader in the House of Representatives, so he should be able to pull some weight. Then you have Cecil Thomas. He is the House of Representatives in District 25. He actually served as a state senator prior to that. Former Cincinnati police officer, I believe. And then you have Mike Odioso in District 30, which is in the western part of the county. If any of those individuals are your representatives, you can send them a note asking for such an investigation. You go on their website. They have a little contact box, and you fill out your information, and they give you a place to say something. So just say that you're supporting the call for an investigation of Mordecai Black's lack of supervision while on post-release control. It's sorely needed or badly needed, and I think it's going to help move forward in terms of identifying the fixes necessary for that process or for that system. So we'll see what happens. I'll let you know if I hear anything back from the Attorney General. But we got to keep digging on this issue, because we don't even know how many people are out there, how many Mordecai Blacks are out there. You know, they have this ranking system for the Adult Parole Authority, and that's what they're trying to do here in Hamilton County. And we don't even know what level Mordecai Black was identified as. Presumably he was at the top level, but even though he was at top level, went missing, had a warrant issued against him, there was no urgency to track him down. No urgency whatsoever. So anyway, I'll let you know if I hear anything back, and I appreciate any support you can send up to the state legislators, and we'll see what happens.